The next question, how can an integrated and aligned hybrid strategy lead to success?
So this is one of my favorite questions, and it's also, I think, just best practice overall. There was a time, and there's still a time when a lot of decisions around real estate were made in silos. So you might have a financial team driving some of the money questions, and then the question was, where do we need to be? How much does it need to cost? That oftentimes is the main driver. And then typically, the operations teams or the facilities teams would come in and then start to figure out, how do we house people? And then maybe the IT teams would come in a little bit later and start to figure out, okay, how do we actually power this up and make it a connected workplace? But a lot of times you would have this sort of segregated and separated process. And what the pandemic did is it really forced the convergence of all of these different work streams. So in order to make decisions around, how do we, move home in the immediate future of the pandemic, but then as we're coming back, there's decisions that will need to be made where different teams have to be included for input. Real estate teams can exclude IT teams from decisions around space. HR teams can exclude IT teams and real estate teams with decisions around policy because it all affects each other. So there's really this great convergence now that's coming into play where integrating all of the team members, bringing everybody to the table at the beginning, and with this more integrated approach will really lead to the best result. I'll tee up Paul and Jason here as well. We've been on a lot of calls together where we really just want to make sure that you can't go down a path and then expect everybody to just catch up with you on your path. There's got to be room for those strategic conversations early on. There's got to be room to understand what's important to each work stream and how are we incorporating that into the overall strategy moving forward. So that's really one of our key pieces of advice, and where I'm seeing that the integrated decision-making process is really going to lead to the most success.
Let me ask you a question before we kind of move on to the next question. So if an organization is large enough to have a corporate real estate director, right? I'm assuming they're the focal point. But if not, who's really taking on those responsibilities for spearheading those efforts internally?
So we're seeing a lot of HR teams that are spearheading some of those return to office and then are still being included on future real estate discussions. So HR finance definitely has always kind of traditionally been leading or included in that process. And we're starting to work with IT teams much earlier on now, which I think is positive. Again, there's such a focus on what is the actual experience within the office place, and people are looking at now from the lens of HR. So what does the policy and the people side say? Technology, how are we actually connected? How easy is it to get around? And then the real estate and the space. So I'd say typically finance, HR, IT teams are coming into play earlier now, and then sometimes it might kind of be the office manager as well if it's a smaller company, the people that have the pulse on the organization, if you will.
Thanks, Jillian.